The Haunting in the Back Room. My name is Ethan Harper, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Millfield, a small town where nothing much ever happens, and for the past 6 years, I've been working the graveyard shift at our local Walmart. It's a job that pays the bills and keeps me busy during the long, quiet nights. My life has always been pretty routine, a steady cycle of work and sleep. But one night, something happened that shattered that routine forever. It was a chilly autumn night, just a few days after Halloween. The store was in that awkward transition phase, where the Halloween decorations were being replaced by Christmas ones, with Thanksgiving barely getting a nod. I had been assigned to the back room that night, organizing the new inventory that had just arrived. It was around midnight, and I was alone in the vast, dimly lit space. The back room at Walmart is a place that always gave me an eerie feeling, especially during the late hours when the store is nearly empty, and the silence is only broken by the occasional hum of machinery or the rustling of plastic. My colleague, Jenny, was in the front, manning the register, leaving me alone to sort through the chaos in the back. Jenny is a petite woman with a no-nonsense attitude, and despite her small stature, she has a way of making you feel safe. I had just finished stacking a pallet of canned goods when I heard a faint, rhythmic tapping. At first, I dismissed it as one of the many ambient noises that filled the space, but the tapping persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I set down my box cutter and looked around, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room, near the loading dock. As I walked closer, the tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a hushed whispering. I strained my ears, trying to catch the words, but they were too faint to make out. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the metal walls. There was no response, just the continuing whispers, now accompanied by a strange, cold draft that seemed to seep through the walls. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease that was creeping over me. It had been a long shift, and my mind was probably just playing tricks on me. I returned to my work, but the unsettling feeling lingered, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. An hour later, I was loading a new shipment of toys onto a cart when the lights above me flickered. It was brief, but enough to make me pause. Then, out of nowhere, a stack of boxes toppled over, crashing to the floor with a loud bang. I jumped, my heart racing. Taking a deep breath, I approached the mess, wondering what could have caused it. The boxes had been stacked securely. There was no reason for them to fall on their own. As I bent down to pick up the scattered items, I felt a sudden, intense chill, as if someone had opened a freezer door right next to me. I looked around, but there was no one else in the back room. The whispers started again, clearer this time, and I could almost make out the words. It sounded like a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Help me. Please." A shiver ran down my spine. This was no trick of the mind. Something was seriously wrong. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and called Jenny. "Hey, Jenny, do you hear anything strange up there?" There was a brief pause before she replied, "No, it's quiet as usual. Why?" "I don't know," I said, glancing around nervously. "I'm hearing these weird noises in the back room. It's probably nothing, but it's creeping me out." "Want me to come back there and check it out?" she offered. "Yeah, that might be a good idea," I said, feeling a small measure of relief. A few minutes later, Jenny arrived. She was a petite woman with a no-nonsense attitude, and I was glad for her company. Together, we walked through the back room, checking for anything out of the ordinary. The whispers had stopped, and the temperature seemed to have returned to normal. "I don't see anything," Jenny said, shrugging. "Maybe it was just the wind or something." "Yeah, maybe," I agreed, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Thanks for checking, though." "No problem," she said, giving me a reassuring smile. "Let me know if it happens again." With Jenny's presence, the atmosphere in the back room seemed less daunting. She stayed with me for a while, helping me sort through the boxes and chatting about her plans for the weekend. It was a welcome distraction from the strange occurrences earlier. But as the night wore on, and Jenny eventually had to return to the front, the unsettling feeling crept back. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. Every time I turned my back, I felt eyes on me, but when I looked around, there was nothing there. The whispers started up again, softer this time, barely audible over the hum of the machinery. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept wandering back to the strange events of the night. Who was the woman in the whispers? Why was she asking for help? And most importantly, what did she want from me? The hours dragged on, and by the time my shift ended, I was thoroughly spooked. I quickly finished my tasks and made my way to the front of the store, eager to leave the eerie back room behind. Jenny was there, chatting with the morning shift workers who had just arrived. "You okay, Ethan?" she asked, noticing my pale face. "Yeah, just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "Long night." She nodded, giving me a sympathetic look. "Get some rest. See you tonight." I nodded and headed out to my car, the cold morning air a welcome change from the oppressive atmosphere inside. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of the store, lurking just out of sight. When I finally got home, I collapsed into bed, hoping that sleep would bring some relief from the unsettling events of the night. But my dreams were filled with the same whispers, the same pleading voice, and the same cold chill. I woke up several times, drenched in sweat, with the woman's voice echoing in my ears. The next night, I was hesitant to return to work, but I needed the job, and I couldn't let my imagination get the better of me. I arrived at the store, trying to push the previous night's events out of my mind. Jenny greeted me with a smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Ready for another fun night?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. I nodded and headed inside, steeling myself for whatever horrors awaited me in the back room. Little did I know, the night was far from over, and the darkness held secrets that I could never have imagined. An unforgettable encounter in aisle 5. My name is Jack, and I'm 35 years old. I've been working at Walmart for the past 10 years, mostly on the night shift. I've seen and heard a lot of strange things in my time here, but nothing compares to the experience I had last year. It was a typical Tuesday night, and I was doing my usual rounds, checking inventory and making sure everything was in order. The store was empty, just the way I liked it, and I was lost in my thoughts as I walked through the aisles. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the back of the store. It sounded like someone rummaging through the boxes in the storage area. I frowned, thinking it was one of the new employees messing around. I headed towards the noise, ready to give them a piece of my mind. But as I turned the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the dim light, was a figure. It was a man, dressed in the old Walmart uniform from years ago, his back to me. "Hey, what are you doing back here?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure didn't respond. He just kept rummaging through the boxes, his movements slow and deliberate. I took a step closer, and that's when he turned around. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes were hollow, empty sockets. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He stared at me for a moment, and then he spoke, his voice a hollow whisper. "I'm looking for something. Something important." His words sent a chill down my spine, and I took a step back, my mind racing. Before I could say anything, the figure vanished, leaving me standing there shaking and confused. I ran back to the front of the store, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I decided to tell my manager, hoping he would have some kind of explanation. My manager, Carl, listened to my story, his expression serious. "You're not the first one to see him," he said, his voice low. "We've had reports of a phantom employee for years. He's been seen by several night shift workers, always in the back of the store looking for something." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Do you know who he is?" I asked, my voice trembling. Carl nodded, his expression grim. "His name was Mark. He worked here about 20 years ago. One night there was a robbery. Mark tried to stop the robbers, but he was shot and killed. They say his spirit still haunts the store, searching for something he lost that night. I felt a sense of sadness and fear wash over me. The idea of Mark's spirit being trapped in the store, endlessly searching, was heartbreaking. I decided to do some research, hoping to find a way to help him find peace. I spent the next few weeks digging through old newspaper articles and talking to former employees. I learned that Mark had been a dedicated employee, well liked by everyone who knew him. The night he was killed, he had been trying to protect a locket, a gift from his wife, that he always wore around his neck. I knew then what I had to do. I needed to find that locket and help Mark's spirit move on. I began searching the storage area, looking through every box and shelf, hoping to find the locket. It was a daunting task, but I was determined. One night, after weeks of searching, I found it. The locket was hidden in a small box, tucked away in a corner of the storage area. It was old and tarnished, but I knew it was the one. I felt a sense of relief and accomplishment as I held it in my hands. I decided to hold a small ceremony right there in the storage area. I placed the locket on a shelf, lit a candle, and said a prayer for Mark's soul. As I did, I felt a sudden warmth, and I heard a whisper. "Thank you." The voice was soft, almost inaudible, but I knew it was Mark. Since that night, the sightings of the phantom employee have stopped. The store feels different, lighter, and more peaceful. I like to think that Mark has finally found the peace he was searching for, and I'm glad I could help him find it. Working the night shift is still a bit eerie, but knowing that I helped a lost soul find peace makes it all worth it. The Haunted Checkout. My name is Lisa, and I'm 28 years old. I've been working at Walmart for the past 5 years, mostly on the evening shift. The store is usually bustling with activity, but it's the quiet moments that always got to me, especially after what happened last summer. It was a Friday night, and the store was unusually busy. I was working at one of the checkout counters, scanning items and chatting with customers. It was around 9 p.m. when I noticed a woman standing at the end of my aisle. She was dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her hair in a bun, and she was just staring at me. I tried to ignore her, focusing on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I glanced up, she was still there, watching me. I finally finished with my customer and decided to approach her. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, trying to sound polite. The woman didn't respond. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with sadness. I felt a chill run down my spine. Before I could say anything else, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I tried to follow her, but she was gone. I couldn't get the woman out of my mind. Her sad eyes haunted me, and I found myself looking for her every night. A few weeks later, I saw her again. It was a quiet night, and I was closing up my register when I noticed her standing at the end of the aisle. She looked the same, sad and lost. I walked over to her, my heart pounding. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. The woman looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm looking for my son," she whispered, her voice soft and filled with sorrow. I felt a lump in my throat. "Can I help you find him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman nodded, her eyes pleading. "He was here. He was just here," she said, her voice breaking. I nodded, determined to help her. "What's his name?" I asked. "Thomas," she replied, her voice barely audible. "He's only 5. He was wearing a blue shirt and overalls." I felt a sense of urgency. I knew I had to find Thomas. I walked through the store, calling his name, but there was no sign of him. I decided to check the security cameras, hoping to find a clue. As I watched the footage, I saw the woman, but there was no sign of Thomas. It was as if he had vanished. I spent the next few days researching, trying to find out more about the woman and her son. I talked to some of the older employees, hoping they might know something. One of them, an old man named George, told me a story that sent chills down my spine. Years ago, before this Walmart was built, there was a small house on this land, George said, his voice low. A woman and her son lived there. One day the boy went missing. The woman searched everywhere, but she never found him. She was heartbroken, and they say she never left the area. Even after she died, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The idea of the woman's spirit still searching for her lost son was heartbreaking. I knew I had to do something to help her find peace. One night I decided to hold a small ceremony in the store. I lit a candle and said a prayer for the woman and her son, hoping it would bring them some peace. As I did, I felt a sudden warmth, and I heard a whisper. "Thank you." The sightings of the woman have stopped since that night. The store feels different, lighter, and more peaceful. I like to think that the woman has finally found her son and the peace she was searching for. Working at Walmart is still a bit eerie at times, but knowing that I helped a lost soul find peace makes it all worth it.